Hey there, Emma here, and in 2023 I hosted a painting challenge called Dogtober where we painted a different dog breed every day of the month. You may have seen some of the clips that I posted on Shorts at the time, just showing like a few little clips from each painting, but I've decided to go and pull out the real-time footage and share them this year so you can follow along if you'd like to. A couple of disclaimers/explainers. The point of the challenge for me was that I wanted to try and loosen up. I'm a realistic portrait artist, and so I gave myself a smaller size to work with as well as a time frame. I'm painting on roughly about A6 size paper, which is pretty small. In terms of measurements, that's like roughly 10.5 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters or 4.1 by 5.8 inches. And I also tried to set myself a time limit of about 15 minutes. I really wanted to challenge myself to loosen up, but you can approach this any way you like. Maybe you'll do it in a different medium or a certain color palette. The options are endless, totally up to you, but you're more than welcome to follow along, and these are kind of like mini tutorials. I do want to point out though that as this was unusual for me and a challenge to me, not all of them are that good. I really struggled in the beginning to start loosening up, and particularly struggled with the long-haired dogs. But you know, it's an adventure and you'll see me progress through the month and learn a lot. If you want to grab the outline sketches, I have put all 31 sketches into a document, a PDF that you can download from my website. I will link that in the description. You'll just need to pop your email address in, which will sign you up to my mailing list, but then you'll get the document with all 31 outline sketches, roughly about the same size that I'm painting. You're more than welcome to print them, trace them, size them up or down if you need to. I'll be working with my usual set of supplies and mixing colors as well, but I will talk you through the process as we go. Let's jump in. Day 24 of Dogtober, and we have a poodle. I'm excited to do another white dog, and this time we're doing it differently from the Bichon Frise earlier in the challenge. So starting off in a similar way though, we are going to do a wet on wet layer to get a couple of preliminary shadows in on this dog, but the star of the show is cutting it out from the background, so negatively painting that in. So I've got some color still left on my palette that I'm going to reuse. It's just like a gray color. You can mix that yourself using the 3 primary colors combined and then really diluting that. If you watch back through some other tutorials, you'll see me mix colors multiple times, but I'm just using the leftover on my palette because I kind of painted these every day in a row. Once the dog is wet down, we're going to start popping our shadows in. So I'm starting with some chest shading here to be like the snoot casting a shadow down on the chest. Popping some on the side of the head, the big fluffy ears. I'm putting some to the underside of the eyes, which are closed. It's a very cute expression. Its eyes are kind of pinched, closed. Pinched is not the right word. What is it? Squished? Whatever. The eyes are closed. It's licking its nose. It's very cute. So I've done some shadows under both eyes and also on the right of the face. A little bit under the ear on the left and making that more intense down the left side. Just trying to put a couple little shadows in all the poofy fur on top of its head to separate like the top poof from the ears. Making it more dramatic on the left though. Again, under the eyes. It's nice to not have to paint eyes in for once and to not have to worry about the highlights or anything like that. I'm just using my brush here to manipulate where that color's gone, kind of lightened it a little bit on the right of the face, and then we're going to dry that off. I am dipping into just more of a concentrated color now. Same color though, I'm just trying to get more of it on my brush. And we are just going to kind of go over these areas on a dry layer and make some of them pop more. So I'm going to talk about what order you should do the background in later on. That conversation's coming, but for now let's pop a couple of these details in. So we've made our life easy. We've already put in the shadows on a wet on wet layer. So now we're just kind of pulling those out, pulling them to the forefront a little bit more. So just kind of blotting my tip of the brush around, because remember it's a curly fur dog as well. So we don't want to just do straight lines or anything like that. Think of it like a cloud, big puffy bits of fur. So I'm just kind of pulling out some longer strokes on the ears. They've got like longer fur there, but on the top of the head and the chest, we want to make that really curly and fluffy. So long strokes in the ear, Pulling out some curly little strokes on top of the head, a little bit more dramatic where it's going to be popping over the top of the face, shading under the eye, and I'm just going to water off my brush and spread that out. It's a bit too intense. I'm just grabbing some Mars Black now, and I'm going to pop in the nostrils. So I've been reaching for my convenience black for most of this challenge, just for the nostrils. Popping in the little sideways commas, mixing in some more of the grey colour with what was left on my brush, and just popping a little shadow under the tongue and to the side of it on the right, just kind of cutting out that mouth around the tongue. And then we are going to dry this off. So it's looking really weird right now, but we are getting somewhere. So I'm going to add a little bit more colour into these areas that we've just done again. So we're going to intensify them more. I did just mix in, I'm mixing in a little bit of black with this colour. I mixed in a little brown that was on my palette. We're going to do the nose now. For brown, you can mix orange and add a little bit of blue. And depending on the proportions will depend on the kind of brown you get, but blue and orange neutralise each other. So I'm popping some colour at the base of this nose, spreading water across the top and just kind of inviting that up. A little bit more black on the palette. Dabbing off the excess from my brush, and I'm going to paint the little eyes in. So they're all kind of like squished together. It's not just like a straight line or anything. Think of it like a bunch of eyelashes squished together. So it's almost like a couple of little spidery type illustrations we're doing there. Oh, so cute. It's starting to come out and pop off the page now. Just took the excess off my brush, then dipped into some more and going down the crease, like the shadow, I should say, around the ears and the face, making them stand out a little bit more. Rinsing off, dabbing off, dipping into a little bit of primary red, and we're going to paint the tongue in. So I'm getting that primary red a little bit dirtied up with the grey colour that was on the palette. And we're going to pop that tongue colour in. Going to dry that off. So what I do here is paint a split down the centre of the tongue and then realise, no wait, I want to do it like we did the Pomeranian, which was painting around that kind of like, it's not a split down the tongue, what is it? Like a little, what's the opposite of a crease? What's something that sticks out? I don't know. Anyway, we are going to spread that colour around, dry it off now, and then paint it in a similar way. So getting some more primary red, and this time I'm going to paint on either side of the tongue and leave this little mark in the middle. So rinsing off, dabbing off, then spreading it around to one side, spreading it around to the other, and there's this little sliver in between those two shapes where we've got the previous colour shining through. With some pre-made black, some Mars Black that I just popped onto the, oh my goodness, popped onto the palette there. I'm redoing the nose, just going over that to make it more just, I cannot speak today. I'm deepening the values. I'm making it stand out more. I'm making it more realistic. Anyway, I'm mixing up a bit of a golden yellow color here. So I've got a little bit of primary yellow and a tiny bit of red. And what I want to do is just pop a couple little like warm highlights on the dog in the highlighted area. So we shaded more of the left side. So I feel like let's go and put a little bit of this yellowy color on the right side to indicate that that's in the warm light and the cooler tone gray color is in the shadow. So I'm just popping that very pale on the top of the head. A little bit on the side of the head, like where the ear is coming down from. Lots of water in my mixture, like you can see that there's a vast difference between the color I'm leaving on the page versus what's on the palette. Running that down the side of the nose on the right side, on the snout. A little bit down the right side of the dog's body, spreading it all around. Very subtle is what we're going for here. So before we paint our background in, I want to do a little bit more shading on the dog itself. So I'm going to get together a bit of a purpley color. So a little bit of primary red, a little bit of primary blue, till I get this kind of blue-violet color, we'll say. And then I'm really going to water down what's on my brush, because I just want a pale amount. So I'm dabbing off the excess, rinsing it off. I'm just kind of popping that on the far side of the head. I also wanted the shadow to be a little bit more of a purpley color so it would contrast off the yellow. They are complementary colors. I'm shading the left side of the face, under the eye and between the ear. under the ear on the left, really intensifying it under there, rinsing off, dabbing off, and just inviting that colour down. A little bit more underneath that as well. A little bit on the right, under the ear and between the ear and the face. So now I want to get together my background colour. So make a big puddle. We do need a fair amount. I mean, not ginormous, but you know, I'm making mine a dark blue colour. So I'm just shoving everything together that's currently on my palette, because why not? And we're going to make a similar colour to what we were just using, but a lot more of it. I've got this kind of blue-violet colour. It's not really violet, but it's not straight primary blue. It's darker than that. So what I want to do is start negatively painting around this dog. And this is going to make everything pop, because right now the edges are not very defined. So the way that I'm doing it here is I'm starting on one side and I'm going to go all the way around the top of the dog and then finish at the other side. And I start basically cutting in the fur. So we are negatively painting in all of the fluff. And then I quickly go back and just fill in the gaps. You don't want to go all the way around the dog, like zigzag, zigzag around all the fur and then go fill in the rest of the background, because those edges will have started to dry and they will form a crust and you're going to see it. So that's not the idea here. We do want it to be like a smooth looking background while, you know, having this fur look like it's standing out in front of it. So I like to do it bit by bit. Something that can be tricky, especially when you're cutting around something that is rounded, is making sure that you don't have blunt little like squared off edges. You have to rotate and move your brush around to make sure that the edges that you finish with are more like pointed. So don't be afraid to move your brush in different directions and have a couple goes at it. You're better off starting a little bit further out from the border of the dog so that if you mess it up, you can cut in further without making the dog all skinny and misshapen. So have a go at that. You can also use a practice piece if you've never done this before and have a go at negatively painting some fur in. And this is a really great way to paint white animals. You don't have to actually really paint them. Obviously we did a little bit of work on them, but you can really let a background do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. Now, as I go around the top here and I'm cutting all this fluffy fur in, I am leaving some gaps as well. And I'm trying to just make the fur point in a lot of different directions to make it look like it's curly. So I'm not just having all the fur lay perfectly down and fall down with gravity like it's sticking up and it's all rough and crazy, and I don't know. I just really like this painting. I think it's fun. Now you could have done this first if you wanted to, and sometimes I do that. If I'm painting something that is a very pale color or it's white, I might put the background in first so that I can adjust my values accordingly. Like the risk that you run when you paint this background in last is that you do too much detail on the white animal, then you put this really dark, heavy background in, and all of a sudden it's just like, ugh, it just feels really heavy. And you're like, darn, I wish I could undo what I did, but now it's way too late. So sometimes putting the darker background in first can help you pare back the amount of detail and value you do on the subject itself, but you also can make your life harder because, you know, I've got these soft blends and whatever. Imagine me trying to do a wet on wet layer when I've already got this background in. I'm not going to match up all these strokes of fur out to the side. It was much easier to wet down the dog and now paint in and cut over that white than it would be to go in and try and match up those edges with water. Like I'd just end up with a big round crust around it and it would be very visible, whereas I've painted over any type of crust that would have been there. I'm just going to pop a little bit of color down the bottom as well. I just wanted to do this because it was like, I didn't put my sketch at the bottom of my piece of paper, so I've just gone under it there for that. But yeah, it's up to you. I often just find it's easier to do the background at the end because I'm working with furry animals and it's going to be much easier to do my wet on wet, do my soft layers, shade things that are close to the edge of the fur than, you know, try and do that later and have to either take my water really close to the edge but not quite perfectly matched up with the strokes of fur and make all this crust, or even worse would be reactivating that dark blue paint and it just seeping into all of my work and giving it a blue tinge that I didn't mean for it to have. But there's no right or wrong way, it's preference. You know, you can try either way. that's totally up to you. I'm now going to finish off with a couple of details. I'm going to dip into my Mars Black and just go over the eyes and the nostrils. After putting that really dark background in, it just feels like my painting has lost contrast. It's just like a bit everything looks a bit faded. You could do a little bit more work here, like you could pop another wash of bright like red over the tongue and make that pop a little bit more. Maybe put a little bit more yellow in the fur just to kind of compete and bounce off that really intense dark background. But that is our poodle, something a little bit different for this month, and I'll see you in the next one.